You are now listening to Halal Talks.
So we were 24 kids in a home, and we were 8 families, and we were not anything formal, but we had put formal rules in place for ourselves and how we operated. But then at one point we decided, you know what, let's open this up for the greater community because so many people were interested in joining, and we thought that it wasn't fair to them to deprive them of the opportunity, but then also we thought it would be nice for our kids to have that experience too of being with more kids. So at that time, when we decided to become a nonprofit, some of the families that we had originally started out with dropped out because they were like, I didn't sign up for this. I want to homeschool on my own. Or I'd rather homeschool on my own than do it with a bunch of other families. And so we became a nonprofit. We were 18 families our first year. We were called ILM Tree. So ILM means knowledge in Arabic, but then it's ILM. It's an acronym for Inspired Learning for Muslims. And then Elm Tree, it's like kind of a pun. And we rented this beautiful home on a private road in Castro Valley. And it was in a very scenic, idyllic location. And we tried it out for a year and it was working pretty well. But within that year, our friend was in the process of buying a 22-acre ranch in Lafayette called Deer Hill Ranch. And so she said, if we buy this property, I can give the rancher's home to Elm Tree to rent for like the next 10 years, lock you in for a 10-year lease, which was in a very desirable neighborhood, very high rent neighborhood, and they gave us a really good price. So we decided to move, and we've been there. So we started as a nonprofit in 2007. Now we're 2017. So, mashallah, our first batch of students who graduated from our 8th grade, one of them's now married, and the others are all in good colleges, and they're all doing really well, mashallah. So yeah, it was kind of like this experiment. They were our guinea pigs, and we didn't know what was going to become of them. But for the most part, alhamdulillah, I would say that we're really, really happy with the results we've seen. All the boys who've graduated, are praying, believing, practicing Muslims. All the girls who started wearing hijab at Elm Tree are still wearing hijab. We don't see that same track record with a lot of the Islamic schools. And so, because we've been keeping track of our alumni to see how they're doing. And so, alhamdulillah, it's completely from Allah, but obviously it's got to do with what the families were doing in the home, as well as what I think the village was giving them as well. And they still come back to us. We're very tight, These kids are like, I think of them as my nieces and nephews, and they think of us as their aunties and uncles. So it's been a successful experiment.
Yeah, we're very, very close. I mean, it's a very large endeavor that we did with people that we became continuously closer and closer with. So after a while, it stopped feeling like work. I remember when we'd get the list, it was like, oh my God, we are so busy. We've got so much stuff to do. I remember cutting down trees and building fences. But during those times, we became so close with the dads and even the children that now it's like, wow, let's go. I want to spend time with these people. And if I don't see them, I really, really miss them. And it's like having all these nieces and nephews and kids that just continuously be added to my life. It's weird. It's just such a beautiful thing. And that's not even talking about the academics, just this community that we've built around caring for our children and becoming so close to the parents. I mean, a lot of the parents are actually, I would say, my best friends now. Some of the dads and the families that we're close with are just so tight. The kids love each other. The moms get along. The dads get along. I mean, and we do the beautiful thing. She's got her tea parties and her ladies' appreciation nights, and we've got our picnics and Super Bowl parties going on, and we all do things together as families. I mean, I think Arham's experienced a little bit of that, with the friends we have, because he's got some common friends now.
And so how does that exactly work? Is that the same kind of unit that you had before, where the teacher or the parents are also teaching as well?
Yeah, so the parents have to teach, or they have to be involved at Elm Tree in some capacity. So they can either do bookkeeping, or they could do janitorial work, or they can teach a class. They can be doing our website development, whatever. There's some kind of job that they can be doing at Elm Tree, and they're required to work with the children at least 1 hour a week at a minimum. So somebody from the family. And one of the greatest, it's really neat how so many of the things at ILM Tree, we find out later that we didn't even intend for it to be because of Sunnah or because this is the way we're supposed to do it in Islam. But then later we'll find out that it's actually backed by the religion as well. And one example I'll give you is we had this gentleman, the Egyptian government had sent him to America. He did his master's in education from Harvard, and they had sent him to America to take a tour of all these different Islamic educational institutions just to see like what are Muslims in America doing, how are they educating their kids.
It was
So
from
somebody,
the Ministry of Education in Egypt, right?
yeah, and so somebody told him about ILM Tree, so he asked if he could come check it out. And he was a very impressive man, and I found out that actually he was kind of like on his way to becoming a sheikh. He was very knowledgeable. So I took him into the yurt, and I hadn't even told him yet that this is where the kids memorize Quran. And I remember he walked in, he said, "This room feels special. What goes on here?" And there was nothing in the room to tell him that this is where Quran gets recited. And so it was neat letting him know that. But anyway, he asked me about our financial model, like how we do this. And so I told him that we figure out how much time every job takes, and then every job is worth a certain number of points based on how much time you put into that job. So, and then every point is worth $80. So a job can be worth 4 points, or it can be worth half a point, or it can be worth 10 points, depending on how much time you put into it. And then you don't get a paycheck. That money gets deducted from your tuition. So there are families that pay zero, and they've got 4 kids going to ILM Tree, and their parents are willing to pay $1,000, and they've got a couple of kids going there. So he said to me, "Wait a minute, let me get this straight." He said, "Are you telling me that you pay the person who cleans your toilets the same as you pay the person who is teaching the class for their time?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, we do. It's not like one's getting $5 an hour, one's getting $20 an hour." And he told me that that was actually from the Sunnah, and he told me about a quote. He said it in Arabic from Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, something about how, I'm going to paraphrase, but something about how a man's worth is known by the excellence and value that he puts into his time. And that's what a person should be rewarded for, is by the value and the excellence they put into their time. And he said, that's what you guys are doing. So it was really neat to, it was very validating to know that was happening at ILM Tree. And
we could have someone who's a janitor doing 1 or 2 days a week also being our web developer, because they need the 4 points from the janitorial work and then the 4 points from the web development work. Mm-hmm. Or they could be on the board. So it didn't really matter as long as they made that choice that this is the job I want to do.
Yeah. So there's no hierarchy in that sense that if you're the president of ILM Tree, you won't be cleaning the toilets. Like Zeeshan mentioned, I mean, he was out there building fences for ILM Tree, and he was president of ILM Tree, So it's not like one person stands around delegating to everyone else. We're all in it together. And I had a friend who's the vice principal of one of the New Horizons schools in Southern California, and she came and visited. And she said, it's interesting, you guys don't have the like waxed floors and the matching furniture, and everything's not state of the art. She said, but you can feel the love in this place. You can definitely feel that people have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into building ILM Tree, alhamdulillah. So then now we're 37 families, and we've been around for like 11 years. And we get requests from all over the country for people ask us to do seminars, people ask us to fly out and train them how to start something similar. People are asking us when we're going to be writing a book, when we'll be putting out a manual on how to do this. We're not there yet. We're still learning from our mistakes. But we're at a very comfortable place right now where we feel we have a lot of the kinks worked out.
As in my role, we used to get calls from people. I think there was 1 year where we got 6 calls from different organizations saying, we want to know what ILM Tree does and how to do ILM Tree. So I put together a PowerPoint. It's like a 2-hour presentation. And even Hina and I spoke at San Ramon Mosque. And when we explain the model, they all love it. But then when we go into the details of how much work it takes, I think the easiest course of action that I heard from feedback was that, well, we have a mosque, we have a board, and they want to do a full-time school. So we're just going to go that way. Because that's sort of the set model that I think people are accepting, and that's kind of like, okay, we'll put some money into it, we'll have a property, and boom, this. Mm-hmm. But this model requires a lot more effort through the years, because each child you're going to travel through this journey for 12 years, so it's a long-term commitment, and that's what we talk about when we interview families as well.
And it's not about just the money, like if somebody can afford to come, it's really about like-mindedness. I mean, we've had really wealthy people apply thinking they were actually very surprised when they got told that we didn't see a fit for them at ILM Tree, because they weren't used to being told no. They're like, if you can pay the tuition, then what's the problem? But really what we're looking for is like-mindedness. We're not looking for the money.
And we have agreements to the fact, we've formalized the things that we need families to do at home. Adab, media agreement is a big one. I think Hina can tell you.
Values agreement.
Values agreement, and it's all based on what the Sunnah recommends. We're not trying to instill on people things that we feel and we made up. It's not man-made rules. It's rules that are according to the Sunnah, and if you follow that philosophy and you can agree to these, then we can consider you.
Yeah.
And it's an amana. So we don't want to police you, So
it's rules according to Sunnah and Sharia, and even, we don't require that every mom has to wear hijab, for example. But if you're at ILM Tree, you do. And there's a certain dress code and how long your shirts have to be and how loose your pants have to be. And so it can be hard on the nafs for some people, Nobody likes to be, a grown adult doesn't want to be told how to dress. But we make sure that everybody understands what they're coming into. And then we've seen really good results, mashallah. Once it becomes a norm for people, then it's easier to start living that life outside as well. And you do then see really the effects of being in an environment for like 7-8 hours a day. We put our kids in public school and think they're going to come out, like I said, come out of the garbage can clean. And but even at ILM Tree, you see the effects and the opposite, the positive effects, like being in that 7-8 hour environment. Then you'll see people be like, I'm making all these changes for the better because of what I'm seeing here, or being quote unquote forced to do here, and that's really rewarding to see that.
What type of outcome are you trying to produce out of ILM Tree? What's the vision for the student that goes there?
The top vision we have is to have students who try to do things with ihsan. Inshallah, that's do things with excellence. We have a very strong emphasis on adab, on character development. There's 10 character strengths that we work on. We're applying for a grant right now through the Templeton Foundation that we're trying to get that helps support religious institutions that want to teach character development. Character development is really huge for us because everything at the end starts with adab, right? And so having respect for learning, having respect for your elders, having respect for the environment. We're trying to make the kids aware of their effect on the earth. Having respect for people of other faith communities so that you don't leave ILM Tree thinking that by default other people are below you and you're better than everyone else. And we want them to be unapologetic about being Muslim. We want them to be confident in who they are and really, really love the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We want all the kids to come out of ILM Tree just adoring him and taking him with them wherever they go, his example.
Yeah, Imam Zaid summed it up really simply. I think it was really, really early. You asked him, Hina asked him, what should we be teaching our children? And he summed it up in 2 words. He's like, adab and love of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's all, you do those 2 things and it just opens up everything else. And I was like, you're like, oh, okay, that's it. That's the advice. I kind of wanted a little more. But, as you follow it, it's just such a mind-boggling, simplified advice because everything's encapsulated into it, right? What I notice also is that the children are always, when I go to school, I feel like the effort is worth it because I'm not there every day. And I go there and I see the children they're like going to school with their cousins. It's like the way they run around and they're loving each other and how upset they are when they don't see each other sometimes on the weekends. And I also know that because of the variety and the teaching and the curriculum, I don't see any children who hate education.
Yeah.
They may not like math, which is okay, but they like to learn because they're being taught in a way that's like one-on-one with small classes. So a teacher can really feel like, hey, what's wrong with this kid? I'm sitting here with 6 kids and he's different today. He's disconnected. What's wrong with him? Oh, his grandma's sick. You know, and so we make dua for the grandma. Or he doesn't like math, so maybe we'll give him more time. Or he doesn't like this subject, we'll give him, instead of studying frogs, he'll study volcanoes. So there's that like little interactions that happen because the classroom is smaller, because the teacher's right there caring.
That you're going to miss when you have 30 kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
for
not-
sure. When you have 6 kids in your group, it's much easier to catch things earlier on.
So from an educational standpoint, is that the kind of differentiation from any other public or private school? Is that smaller classroom, or is there like a change in the curriculum as well at Elm Tree?
So the curriculum has been cobbled together from the best of what's out there. Like, for example, we taught Singapore math because Singapore has the highest rates, you know, and test scores in their math program in their country. And so we teach Singapore math. We teach Institute for the Excellence of Writing. IEW is a program we use for writing. And so we've looked at all the different programs that really have a good track record, and then we get our teachers trained in them so that they can teach them at Elm Tree. So definitely having good curriculum, but I think one of the best features of Elm Tree is the small class size. Not having class sizes. Rahim's class right now is the largest class ever in history at Elm Tree, and the largest class at Elm Tree right now. And we've decided we're never going to do it again, and it's still working fine with them. His class is 9 students. But we've decided we're going to do 6. And if we ever really have to go to 7 because the ideal family comes and we just don't want to say no, we'll make an exception then. But we're going to keep it at 6.
Yeah, we're not subject to California's new core curriculum regulation or whatever the folks, you know, who are appointed change things. You know, we're not subject to that. So that we're independent. Alhamdulillah. Hopefully we can keep it that way. But yeah, this through trial and error, and one of the things we learned was that there was a time when Elm Tree was trying to be too many things to different parents, and if you don't have one track, one laser focus, and one vision, you will not be good at any one thing. And so we went back to that pure homeschooling involvement of the parents thing for the last 3 years, and it's worked back. So we kind of tried through trial and error. We've gotten to where we are. It's 11 years of experience to get there.
Yeah, what we realized our error was that there came a point where the vision was serving the people instead of the people serving the vision. And because we started making all these exceptions to what our vision was because it didn't work for such and such family or so-and-so family. But then we realized, no, everybody has to agree on the vision, and we keep going back to the vision. If it's not working for you or you don't like it, then maybe this isn't the best place for you at this time. And it's been tough, but it's been important to do that.
So Elm Tree seems like a really nice blend of an Islamic school and homeschooling environment. The biggest criticism that I think these two types of schools get is the social skills aren't developed. I went to Islamic school myself from 4th to 10th grade, and this was the biggest thing that outsiders say, that like, how are you going to develop social skills if you're just in a bubble with other Muslims, people who come from the same type of environment? When you actually go to college, university, and start working, you're going to have to deal with non-Muslims. And if you didn't get that experience when you were growing up, then how are you going to be able to do that effectively? So have you seen that problem in your own school? And also, what do you do to hinder that?
So in the early years, definitely the kids see things as very black and white. And we partner with Sienna Ranch. We're neighbors with Sienna Ranch. So Sienna Ranch has mainly, their staff is not Muslim. And they teach our kids science. And so our kids' first exposure to having teachers who are not Muslim would be through Sienna Ranch classes. And so, yeah, the Sienna Ranch teachers are like, we've never had so many kids ask us about whether we have boyfriends and girlfriends and what we believe and what religion we are. Like, because they teach other students also in the community, but they said Elm Tree kids are different, especially the little ones. They're very curious. And so I do this cultural sensitivity training with the staff at Sienna Ranch. And so I explain to them how they're really the first stepping stone for our kids out into the world, and that's our kids are like testing the waters and trying to figure out who believes what. And why people are the way they are. And so it was a light bulb moment for them. They were like, oh, that explains it. And they were really honored that we give them that kind of trust with our children. But really the kids' exposure with people of other understandings is through them getting to know their neighbors. A lot of the kids are in their sports programs in their cities. We keep our Fridays off so that the kids can be involved in like volunteer projects, and along with going to Juma as well. And then we have different programs that we do at ILM Tree. We have a program called Branches, and that's where we work with the interfaith community, and their kids come to ILM Tree, and we've started this thing called Grow to Give Orchard, where we planted 100 fruit trees, and we had children from the Jewish and the Christian communities come out and work with our kids in planting these 100 trees. And each family donated like $100 per tree to get this tree planted. And then the hope is, inshallah, in 4 or 5 years to work with the urban farmers. They're this amazing group. They're a volunteer group, and what they do is, if you have fruit trees in your backyard that are producing a lot of fruit and you don't know what to do with them, you sign up, you register with the urban farmers, and their volunteers come out and they pick your fruit, and then they go and distribute it to the poor and the hungry in the communities. So we've got this Grow to Give Orchard that our kids are taking care of with kids from other communities. And so they're learning how to serve the community, they're learning how to give back, and then also our kids give an Islam 101 presentation to the Jewish and Christian kids that come. So they're learning how to speak about their religion. So it's baby steps, so that by 8th grade, they know how to talk about their religion, they know how to work with people from other communities, and they know how to give back to the community. So
well, I think I don't want to be so apologetic about it. I mean, I think incubation is important, and sheltering and leaving them naive and brittle and fragile is another thing. So I think the question that it's a loaded question from somebody who's already decided to criticize it. So I would say that incubation is really important, and that you want to build a strong sense of self and love of education. And and the other thing we have is Dr. Sachs is also, he's written books on boys and girls, and he's a therapist, has a family practice, but he has some amazing books called Boys Adrift and Girls on the Edge. Mm-hmm. And if you read that, it's like intergenerational strata of children interacting with each other is really important. And we have 70 to 80 children from preschool to 8th grade, and they're all interacting with each other. Mm-hmm. And homeschoolers who are homeschooling, they homeschool in the morning from 9 to 12, but then they go out to park days, they go to pottery classes. So this notion of like, oh, you're not being socialized, that's just a false narrative now. I mean, it can be completely disproven if someone wants to really look into it and think about that question. So I would answer it that way.
Yeah, socialization's actually the least of our worries.
Yeah.
There's other concerns, like, are we preparing them well academically?
Yeah.
Are we preparing them well, to be confident in their religion? But socialization, they get that.
Yeah, they get that.
They really do.
Yeah, and they're gonna learn how to interact. I mean, the only way you can keep them away from the influences of this society is to actually make hijrah somewhere else, to a village in Pakistan or Mauritania or somewhere, and that's not even guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So that's just an old question. I mean, that doesn't even apply anymore.
But I remember when Sheikh Hamza said that, when people used to ask him, aren't you worried about socialization? And he'd say yes, and that's exactly why we're homeschooling. Socialization is the reason we homeschool.
And I'm not saying, I had the exact same thought. I remember the first time Sheikh Hamza talked about homeschooling, I'm like, that's a crazy idea. I remember going, that's so maverick, and granola heads do that. I think Hina used that term too. It's like, wow, that's so maverick. But at the same time, as you're a parent, your job is to protect. It doesn't matter what other people say. You have to protect. And the mother is the first madrasa. And we have the saying of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhum, which is the first 7 years you care for them and play with them. The second 7 years you teach them. The third 7 years you
are their friend.
You guide them. And then if you've done your job, they'll be okay.
At 21, yeah.
And that's exactly how it plays out. That's exactly how you need to think about how we need to think about it. And that's exactly preparing you for teenagehood, because when your children become teenagers, it's that second 7 years. It's like age 8, 9, they're really changing because they're forming their view of the world. They're not children. So you've got to adjust as a parent. And we've heard that all the time, but it's so important to really consciously understand that there are these shifts happening. What am I as a parent doing to accommodate that shift in the best way? As opposed to, oh, well, the shift is happening, but I'm me and I'm going to parent the way I want or school the way I want. So
And I think this goes back to what you had said earlier, which is getting to know your children. Mm-hmm. And I think that question of socialization almost comes from, I'm just going to put it out bluntly, is from a lazy perspective. Mm-hmm. For your education, the school time to take care of all of your child.
Yeah.
But in reality, you're sending your child to school to learn, and then when they come back home, you still have time with them that you need to put in to foster that time and to create with them. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of time for socialization then as well. Mm-hmm. So I think people need to start really kind of taking that perspective, which is what I've loved hearing from both of you, which is really taking action with your children, getting to know them, showing them the love, mm-hmm. and really getting to kind of be with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John Taylor Gatto talks about the difference between the words education and schooling. And so your kids are going out, they're being schooled. You are the primary educator no matter what, as long as they live in your house. And even after they leave your house, you're their parent. Mm-hmm. So education falls on you. Schooling, learning how to subtract, add, multiply, divide. Okay, you may not do that. You may farm that out. But that's not education. Education is how you take those tools and turn them into learning, forming that human being. So I think that's the important takeaway. As a parent, you've got to do that.
And so what would you both say is the 5 or 10 year kind of plan, the next 5 or 10 year plan for ILM Tree?
Oh, wow. Next 5 or 10 year plan. It's interesting because this is a year that my youngest is graduating from ILM Tree, so technically I'm done after having been with it from the beginning. They've asked me to stay on for 2 more years as an employee, as a manager, while we're in the process of training my replacement. So it's been interesting, like getting ready to hand over the reins to the next generation of young moms. And right now, this is like so surreal for me. Right now, I'm the oldest mom at ILM Tree. And when I started, that was not the case. And so it's been very humbling to be part of this process. And looking forward, it's weird because they keep asking like what's the vision like moving forward, but I feel like it's really now up to the next generation of parents to decide. The vision is still there, which is to raise children who are confident Muslims and who love learning. Those are our 2 main goals, and who do things with excellence. So I guess 3 main goals. And as of right now, we're still planning to be at the ranch. We're still planning to stay small. And we're in the process of interviewing families for the next year. And we're being very selective, even though financially we could use, more than a few families to join. But we've decided we're not going to make any exceptions to the rule because we want to really preserve the culture that's there right now.
Yeah, I think protecting the visions, because the folks who built ILM Tree that are now going out of the system learned a bunch of lessons. And so that's why the vision and guarding the gates are so important, and the philosophy. And I always fear that the new management and the new people who run it are not going to make the same mistakes we made, which is veering from the vision, mm-hmm. and then learning the mistakes and having to go back to the vision. So I would say that keeping the vision and sticking to your guns in terms of when attractive folks come, and sticking to your guns about the philosophy and letting them in, and who you let run certain jobs, because that's ultimately what the managers are doing now. And the adab, those 3 things have to be maintained. And everyone wants to go through their own cycle of learning and making mistakes. And I'm hoping that it just stays that way.
And it's interesting because even some of the newer members who've been there like 3-4 years, they'll want to make all these big drastic changes based on one or two little things, but they don't realize like the dominoes effects of that we know based on history, based been there, done that. Yeah. And like we recently had a rodent problem at ILM Tree, and alhamdulillah, it's been dealt with now, but we had a rodent problem that was stressing a lot of the moms out. And so quite a few people were just coming to us and saying, why can't we just get a cat? Why don't we just get a cat and put it in the building, and it'll take care of the rodents over the weekend while we're gone? And we were like, okay, that's something you have to go through the whole process, how you want to make this proposal to bring. And they were just like, what? It's so simple. I have a cat. I can bring it on the weekend, leave it. And we were like, you know what? We're not even going to tell them why they can't just do that. We're going to let them make the suggestion at our weekly meeting that we have with all the moms. So we said, okay, why don't you just bring up the suggestion? And so they were like, we want to bring this cat. It's going to take care of the rodents. Like automatically 3 or 4 moms were like, one was like, I'm allergic. Even if you put it here, it's going to come through the vents. It's going to get in the dander. My kid has these allergies. And the person who had brought the suggestion was like, I did not expect that much pushback on such a simple solution, getting a cat. And we were like, exactly. When you're working with 37 different families, there's so many different things that come to the table that you have to have a process in place that needs to be very well thought out every time you're going to make a suggestion for anything that's going to affect everyone, right? But yeah, I think moving forward, the main thing is really, like Zeeshan was saying, protecting the vision, because a lot of the families are nervous about the older families leaving and what that means. And then there's some families that are really excited about, ooh, when is it our turn? And so there's some nervousness about what these changes are going to mean.